This episode of the e-commerce playbook is brought to you by Omnisend, the top-rated email and SMS marketing platform for online merchants. With Omnisend, setting up e-commerce automations is so simple you'll have them up and running before you finish your morning coffee. Plus, you can segment your customers based on their shopping habits and even dive into SMS or push notifications, all from one seamless dashboard. Omnisend isn't just another marketing tool, it's the secret weapon behind over 100,000 successful e-commerce brands. Whether it's crafting eye-catching emails or sending out timely texts, Omnisend helps you connect with your customers like never before. So don't wait. Your best campaigns are just a click away. Go to www.omnisend.com and start today.
Welcome to another episode of the e-commerce playbook podcast, special industry report featuring the fine gentlemen of the DTC index. We are back to discuss October. We're teasing something really cool that we've got coming out next week. Lots of stuff happening. Let's jump right in. Below me, Steve, has it started snowing yet? I'm glad you're still here. I feel like we lose you in a couple of weeks as soon as the slopes open. How are you doing?
That's right. I am doing great. Seeing plenty of snow here in Colorado and looking forward to a good ski season. I'm director of data at Common Thread Collective and stare at a lot of the data that we have for our models, our AMER spend models, as well as a lot of the data from direct to consumer confidence index, the DTCCI that we get a lot of the data from no commerce for.
Nice. And now we also have the Nuggets beat reporter here with us today, giving you the latest on Nikola Jokic's magical season. Mr. Jeremiah Prummer, how are you, sir?
Yeah, that's right. So 2 days ago, Jokic had a great game as per usual. But we will avoid those subjects today and just stick to D2C. I'm doing well, founder, CEO of No Commerce. And we're going to be diving in a little bit on everybody's performance in terms of the D2C and DTCCI rather, and how that's going. And then also kind of covering a hot new topic in the space that's popped up in the last few weeks that I think everybody's looking at and trying to see where they should be investing their dollars right now.
All right. And last but certainly not least, the low-key, mellow, even-tempered member of the group. Also a green thumb and an artist, apparently, behind him, like the scene that we have today. Yarden, who are you and what are you providing for us today?
I'm a co-founder CEO of Veros. What we do is real-time benchmarking and market trends for digital marketers. So we have about 7,000 brands on Veros. They share data with us. We anonymize, aggregate that. And so we have a very large database of first-party data from Shopify, Meta, Google, TikTok, and so forth that people view through a dashboard for their own business. But, we're looking at aggregate views here for these conversations.
Awesome. Well, today we're here to discuss October, as well as reflect a little bit on some of the things that happened pre and post election and tease something that we have really cool coming out before Black Friday, our first ever D2C Index special report. But we'll get to that in just a moment. To start, let's reflect back on October. We came out of a September where we had seen some initial concerns about trends related to growth rates declining amongst some of the seven-figure brands in particular. Yarden, did October show any signs of recovery for our industry?
Unfortunately not. It basically just flattened. I mean, I guess, the optimist will say, well, the bleeding stopped. So there was no bounce back. Basically, seven-figure brands were flat in terms of year-over-year growth. Of course, not a good thing. I mean, the companies that we track are theoretically high growth. And, they live off of, new customer revenue coming in. New customer revenue is actually down year over year, which means that, at some point that'll catch up with them if it's not already catching up with them now. And, the 8-figure plus brands are at about 10% a year over year revenue growth, which was the same as last year, which is pretty good, but we would hope to see better of it. Yeah. And I'd say like a big trend here is, really looking into the data, is that there's a lot, like there is a majority of businesses that are growing, but there's a lot that are declining and are on steep decline. And so there is this dichotomy of like the median is 0% year over year growth, but there's a lot of negative impact going on and a lot of brands that are absolutely crushing.
Sort of that tale of two cities that we have discussed previously. What about on the ad side, Yarden? What are we seeing in terms of spend across the platforms and ecosystems in October?
So I'll just go quickly through that. I mean, as we're used to seeing, so Meta year-over-year CPMs are up, but and spend is way up. ROAS is actually down, but only 4%. So spend's up nearly 25%. ROAS only down 4%. So Meta continues to keep efficiency even with increased spend. Google, different story. Both spend is down and ROAS is down even more. TikTok continues to be the roller coaster that it is. It's really only 3-4% of share of wallet. They haven't been able to break that barrier, and ROAS is increasing year over year, but off a very weak 2023. Yeah, I think it's interesting also to, like, as we look at October, to look at what happened with elections, half October, half November. So if you look at it, there was a lot of hype before elections on what is going to happen. Should we spend? Should we not? Surprisingly, what we found at Vero, which I'd say is, actually what happened. I mean, it tracks enough that the election didn't have very specific impact on ROAS that can be pointed to. So, like, the way that we ran these numbers is we said, like, we basically bucketed the year-over-year ROAS change in terms of significantly deteriorated, slightly deteriorated, and slightly improved, and significantly improved. Significant is over 10% on both sides. Slightly is under 10%. So before the election, in the 2 weeks leading up to the election, a year over year on Meta, 40% had significant deterioration. So a ton really struggled in terms of ROAS performance, but 35% had significant improvement. So actually there was a lot of improvement, and in the middle is the rest, but actually minority. So these swings are very aggressive to both sides. Now, the thing that really surprised me is, we're only a week after the election that when we're recording this, but I reran the numbers, that same analysis, just what happened from November 6th up until November 13th. And for Meta, we see basically the same numbers. So really interestingly, like, the election didn't necessarily affect the ROAS performance on Meta, which, like, on the one hand surprises me. On the other hand, we've seen this so many times with Meta, that the scale that it has and the diversification of formats and, the skills and the algorithms, like, it has been able to handle these waves. Remember the Temu huge wave coming in, it didn't really affect advertisers there on it. Google actually deteriorated more after the election. So Google is strong, and now this is starting to get into, like, comparing to Black Friday, Cyber Monday, holiday ads of last year and so forth. But Google, 60% of advertisers in the past week, the week after the election, had significant deterioration on ROAS compared to the year before, where only 25% of them had significant improvement. And as opposed to, it's up from 50% had significant deterioration in the weeks pre-election. So it even got worse after the election.
Do you sell stuff online? If you do, you need Omnisend. Yes, that Omnisend. The powerful yet refreshingly intuitive email and SMS tool that helps you make $73 for every dollar spent. The one that's so good, it's almost boring. Like watching steady lines go up and up and up. Just automate your email and SMS campaigns with Omnisend, set it up once, then sit back and watch the sales roll in while you snooze. Oh, are you still awake? Then give Omnisend a try and start getting sales so steady they'll definitely put you to sleep. Just go to www.omnisend.com or click the first link in the show notes.
And if I could just recap that. So it sounds like we've got flat growth on the 7 figures, 8 figures up a little bit, which could be interpreted a couple ways. It could be bottoming out with a hopeful upward movement because we stopped the bleeding, or it could be continuing to lag. But as we move out of October into the beginnings of the election, we start to see maybe some positive signs that the election wasn't quite as negative as we thought, and Meta handled it better. And Steve, I actually think you have some interesting data to support some optimism as well, coming out towards the end of October around what customers are just declaring about the economy and what their plans are for spending. So will you share a little bit of that with us as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really interesting. We kind of normally would expect the last 2 weeks prior to the election to kind of be a significant drop off in performance during that time. And it did drop in the data set that we were looking at. AMER specifically, acquisition marketing efficiency, went down to like from an average for the month of around 3.06 to down to 2.6. So it did drop off in performance, but really didn't get as deep as we thought it would be. And that's kind of because we were seeing a significant bump in the anticipation of the future of the economy. That started around the week of October 21st. We saw our first positive signal for, I expect the economy to be better in the future than worse.
So
And
I want to linger here for a second because I think this is a big milestone for us. So tell us a little bit about what is this question that you're specifically referring to? How long have we been asking it? And what do you mean it's the first positive? Can you go a little deeper on that for us?
Yeah, the question is, do you think the economy will be better or worse in the future? Yes, no, about the same. Or better, worse, about the same. And we've seen a net negative signal, meaning the majority of people saying that the economy will be worse in the future. They anticipate it being worse in the future, to being pessimistic. And we started this in March of 2023. So just as Silicon Valley Bank was going belly up. So it certainly had especially as we began, we were looking at some potential other banks having issues at that time. So I certainly understand where that was coming from. But really in the last 3 weeks, we've seen a significant uptake in people believing that the economy will be better in the future.
And Jeremiah, will you give us some explanation of how we deliver those questions and who they're delivered to?
Yeah, definitely. I did want to add some more context there. So we are the way that those questions are delivered is that there is an experience within no commerce. So again, we work with 4,500 brands, close to 5,000 now, who are running surveys. And so you can opt into what is called automated insights within no commerce. And we have a bunch of different questions that are run as part of that. And so that specific question where we're looking at the future of the economy is run on an order confirmation screen after somebody completes a purchase. So there is a bias to it, but the bias makes sense in the context in which we all operate, right? We're surveying people who are buying products online, and ultimately that's who we're selling to anyway. So I think that bias is actually a helpful thing. What's really interesting is this question has been answered over 500,000 times in the last 18, 19 months since we started running the survey. We're talking about like hundreds of thousands of people that have answered this. And this is the first time in that time frame where we're actually seeing net positive future sentiment, which is kind of wild, actually. And it makes sense, like this tracks with any other macroeconomic indicator that you're going to look at. But I do think it's a really interesting thing. And when we talk about timing, it is really awesome that this is happening a few weeks ahead of Black Friday.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a chance that we could peg that as like a very bullish signal. That over the course of now, what is it? That's like 22 months now or so of tracking data, 20 months of tracking data. The general population has never had a positive sentiment about the future of the economy. And that has changed. That you combine with obviously stock market, Bitcoin, whatever macro, like you're saying, reference to other macro indicators. And one of the things we had talked about is that the best possible election result was probably consensus, was probably not conflict, right? So setting aside any feelings about who won and just saying that there was a clear path to victory, not a lot of contention about that in a way that the economy has responded positively to. I think we could all say, and maybe does anybody want to steel man the other side? I don't know if you do, but I think that that's a really positive signal heading into Black Friday, Cyber Monday for us as a community.
Totally. And I think we're probably all on our dashboards. I'm checking every few hours to see like how these initial Black Friday, Cyber Monday, revenues are going and stuff. And we're actually seeing healthy holidays right now. So like from November 7th, we're seeing a big spike in revenue across the board. And that spike's holding, daily revenues seem higher than the year before. And it's interesting because like that spike on from our data set, like that spike on the 6th or 7th is actually earlier than what we saw previously, which was more around November 10th, November 11th. So there was something about like the elections that everyone is holding out, and it ends and let's go. Even though Black Friday, Cyber Monday is later than usual, but yeah, the early signs, the first week actually look pretty
I
healthy.
agree. I think there's some definite positive stuff. Steve, what are you seeing on the discount rate front? This is a story we've been tracking for a while now in terms of our industry leaning in. There's some inflationary elements to this conversation. There's other pieces. Are we seeing that to continue to trend up year over year?
We are, yeah. We saw that higher, 14% higher year over year for the last 28 days. And basically beating it almost every day, except there's a little bit of offset with the days because we have Veterans Day kind of landing on, I think, Saturday last year compared to Monday this year. So a little bit earlier on that. Otherwise, every day was significantly higher discount. What's interesting is we've seen stronger discounts given to returning customers or returning customers purchasing on higher discounts, even though their revenue is only up like 4.5% from returning customers. Whereas new customer revenue, we saw significantly higher revenue in our data set of like close to 15%.
Yeah, so it's so interesting because when I was looking at Veros' discount rate, like we're seeing, I think it's like, yeah, this is 15%, where you guys are seeing much higher discount rates, which is really interesting. I mean, because I was actually surprised that discount rates are elevated, but not elevated to a crazy amount over the holidays, which naturally you think about Black Friday as a big discount event. But we actually didn't see that. We don't see them go crazy just yet. But in your data set, they are.
Well,
which
when
is
you
very
say,
interesting.
yeah, 15% is actually pretty close to where we are too. So we're just tracking year over year, but the actual percentage amount is actually very similar. So we have right around 15% is the discount rate. Generally, it spikes obviously ahead of BFCM. So I think the actual amounts are similar, but we're just seeing that year over year, it's up 14 against a baseline. It's around 15%. So somewhere in that, still nominally, you're talking about like 1.8% increase in discount rate totally, but not. So to be clear, we're not saying it's going from 15 to 30. We're saying plus 15% on a baseline of about 14% is about 15.8, like something, you get what I'm saying? So it's not that it's going from 15 to 30, not that way. 15% on the baseline.
But why do you think it's not? So
not time
okay,
yet.
so yeah, that makes sense. But it's not time yet, but
Yeah,
it will.
Black Friday, Cyber Monday, I think it'll jump all the way up to like 25, 26% on average. Steve?
Yep. Yeah. And I think it normally tops out there. At that point in time, I think brands stop being profitable. So it's tough to go above that too much high, at least collectively. There might be individual brands that are working on higher margins that can go higher. But I mean, lending back to the thing we covered last issue, and I don't necessarily know that discounts are always conducive to driving more revenue. Like the higher discount doesn't always mean more higher revenue.
Yeah, totally. And I think there's like an upper bound here that's like sort of a law of physics of ecom, that there's some point at which like the money doesn't make sense anymore. And so I think that 25, 26% is hard to push the average above that in terms of discount rate.
Yeah.
Jeremiah, I know going into these key moments, it's always an important topic for us to look at how purchase behavior changes, how gifting becomes a part of the conversation. What are you guys seeing heading into Black Friday, Cyber Monday on the survey side? What insights do we have from your data set?
Yeah, there's not been a big shift yet in gifting. I think that's going to be playing out. So we'll definitely include some information on that front in the report. The big shift usually starts to happen right around now. So I think if we look at historical years, that's when it starts, and then it really accelerates after Black Friday. That's when you will see the peak of gifting. I mean, I know we've covered that a little bit in the past, but we'll definitely make sure that in this issue, there's a little bit of information there. So nothing major on that front. I think just in general, I will say to you, like we're tracking just we kind of track revenue in that we pull order data with surveys. So when we're showing a survey, we're pulling the order information as well. So we are seeing just in general, just a slight tick up on almost like a daily basis right now in terms of like the volume of surveys that we're showing. So I believe, at this point, yeah, we're getting close to, we're like 400,000 plus surveys a day. So it's growing. It's a lot higher than it was in October, and I think we're just going to see that continue to ramp up slowly for the next week and a half or so. So yeah, nothing major in terms of like shift right now in buying behavior, but that is coming. And obviously, like when we recap November and Black Friday, Cyber Monday, there's going to be some really interesting information there.
One thing I wanted to close the loop on, Steve, was that you had published a lot of data about the potential dip following Prime Day in October and just the sequence of revenue there. Can you close the loop for us on what did we see for Prime Day this year and how did that affect performance in October?
Yeah, I mean, it did drop off. It just didn't drop as significantly as we thought. We're looking at that AMER specifically. That's the one. And keep a little bit closer attention on the acquisition of new customers can become a little bit challenging after you kind of cleared out the funnel. And we did see, like, as we were talking about, kind of between the election and Prime days, we saw it kind of bottom out on October 26th and kind of a low point on October 19th as well, around like that 2.6 number and then 2.7 on October 19th. But we didn't see it kind of maintain as low as it even was like last year after Prime. We saw a deeper dip from Prime last year and kind of a quicker recovery. You know, that I think it was the positive economic sentiment combined with more discounts year over year that kind of drove things to kind of be a more productive October from our perspective.
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed is that, as usual, there was the PR sort of cycle about Prime Day being the biggest day of sales ever for Amazon, which is usual. So some key takeaways I've seen is consumers spent $7 billion online outside Amazon on second day of Prime Day. Independent sellers on Amazon sold more than 200 million items. Mobile commerce accounted for half the purchases. Buy now, pay later was a huge piece. But one of the things that was interesting is that they didn't actually publish the numbers. And usually they like to, there's some sort of correlation between how detailed the report is and just how bullish they are on the scenario. And this was a little bit more of an ambiguous, we broke the record. So I thought that was interesting that they were kind of muted in sharing the data about how Prime Day performed for Amazon.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it makes me believe that they beat it, but not as significantly as they had hoped.
One thing, too, this is very anecdotal. This is like my personal experience here, but I'm curious what you guys experience as well. The summer Prime sale, I forget exactly when that was, felt bigger to me and felt more in my face than this one did. Like I didn't even notice it, honestly. I completely missed it. I actually had some stuff I wanted to buy for Prime Day, and I just didn't even know it was happening. So I knew it was happening, but it was like off by a couple of days. So it just didn't feel like it was marketed as well, potentially. Like I don't know if you guys experienced that as well.
You know what's funny is that like the more obscure the stat, like, so you ever watch a sports game and they're like, that was the most hits on a Thursday during a night game against teams in the National League. Like you start seeing these really obscure stats. And so some of the headlines are like that, where I saw like people bought items across 35 million different categories, or like you started to see the presentation of the data be like, we're reaching for a way to say that this was better than ever across these more and more obscure measures versus like, this was the revenue, we smashed it by this much, you know? And so that to me is always a little bit of a red flag. All right, before we wrap up, because we knew October was going to be a briefer one as we get ready for what is going to be a much meatier report about the November Black Friday recap. But also, part of the reason we're going lighter on this one is because we have made a decision that we are going to put out our first ever special report. Coming 2 weeks from today, so today's November 20th or November 14th, we're going to try and get this out before Black Friday and Cyber Monday to help you all make some decisions, is we are going to publish the first ever DTC Index special report. Yes, we're putting ourselves on the hook right now, gentlemen, for getting this published, and it is all about AppLovin. So if you've been in the e-commerce space, you know that there is this wild new ad network called AppLovin that has just exploded onto the scene. In my 12 years of doing this, it is the most energy and movement of money I've ever seen towards an ad platform this fast. And so we are going to deep dive into the data across our network here to publish for you the deepest insights we can on how AppLovin is actually performing on behalf of e-commerce businesses. But Jeremiah, you put together some good info that I'd love for you to tease out to just illustrate how big this movement is on this ad network and how important it's going to be for people to understand what's happening.
Yeah, sounds good. So We have, obviously, we track a lot of data in aggregate. And so one of the questions, we have 2 questions in our platform that we recommend that brands ask. One of them is, how did you first hear about us? And then the other one, sorry, there's other questions too, but of the questions that we're looking at, these 2 specifically are very interesting. So how did you first hear about us? And then if somebody says that they bought today from an ad, asking them where they saw the ad. So we've got those 2 questions that we're asking. And so I think I won't dive too much into the details right now, but I can just say, like, if you look back the last 6 months, like the growth in people discovering brands and buying brands because they saw ads in the context of a game or mobile app is massive. Like it's what massive growth. So anyway, we'll be sharing a little bit about that. And then the other thing that's really interesting is we're just seeing, like, we do see click data on orders. So we can look at first click, last click as this data is coming through. And so, I mean, we've seen over 100,000 orders already attributed to AppLovin on a click basis. So there's some really interesting stuff that's happening, and all of that's in the last 5 months. Very, very fast growth. So yeah, we'll break down a little bit more of that, kind of the trend that we're seeing, but it's very interesting. I think there's a lot of nuance to the data always. And then I think we're going to kind of tackle this report from a few different angles, looking at survey data, looking at click data, looking at demographics data if possible. And then I think, Taylor, you've got a few other things that you're thinking about as well in that context.
Yeah, so across our portfolio, we have seen some customers that are like awesome legacy DTC players actually exceed their meta budget with AppLovin, which is just, it's hard to fathom that as being possible for some of these brands to get to that kind of scale that quickly. Now, some things that I find interesting is reporting is default 7-day click optimization. Most of the brands that I'm seeing are comping this on both a first click basis using a North Beam triple whale or a last click basis on GA to Meta. They're seeing comparable results on those measures. We have some holdout studies live right now that we're going to share the results from to make sure that we're actually seeing an incremental impact. That's sort of the gold standard of media these days. But the pace of scale is enabled by the ability to just sort of transfer your existing ad assets. So you can use your vertical video formats off of Meta, get them immediately uploaded into a very similar ads manager UI with a managed service. There's $10,000 in ad credits being given out. So the adoption rate is really fast. The volume is there. And brands are taking advantage of it. So we want to give you a view of how impactful this could be for your business with some really high quality data, both on the survey side. Yarden's going to go gather he told me he was going to get $2 billion in AppLovin spend data here for us over the next few days, and we'll pile that into the report. But here's the thing, you got to sign up, right? So if you sign up to subscribe to the D2C index, and we have a code for you to do that right now, you're going to get the October report, everything that we just discussed, but you're also going to get access to this special edition for free. Otherwise, it's going to be expensive. This is going to be a high in demand report, and you're going to be able to buy it as a one-off. But if you're a subscriber right now and you use NOV50 right now, you will get $50 off your subscription to the D2C index that will come with the AppLovin report for free. Otherwise, you're going to have to pay for it. So go ahead and take advantage of that right now, and we will load you up in 2 weeks with an awesome, detailed, in-depth report of what we're seeing across this channel. Anything else to add, to tease there, gentlemen, on the AppLovin front?
No, I think just, from both perspectives of a brand, that's considering this new ad platform, that I think we've seen over the years that sometimes, there's these new formats that come out and there's really a lot of arbitrage opportunities, especially right at the start, which is where we are. You need to know this before you get into it. And then, on those strategic investor side of things, to really understand, what's real and what's not, what the data is being seen on the ground. And, the mix of data that's coming from this. I mean, I know all of us here are getting a lot of emails from a lot of people to try to understand what's going on. And we said, well, maybe we'll put together our perspective here because we are the holders of the data. And so I think it's, going to be
awesome.
really helpful.
And if you join, you're also going to get Jeremiah's 10 tips to reach level 1,000 on Candy Crush. So that will also be in the AppLovin report if you sign up today. So go and check it out, d2cindex.com. We appreciate all of you. Thanks for tuning in.